success is defined as taking a great leap right into the next step in a very clear path. But to me, the biggest win and step there that happens is basically when you achieve a certain level of financial security that actually enables you to stop thinking as, as a self, what is good for me, what do I have to do for my own success, to what can I do to society, what can I do to help others, what can I do to grow. That for me was a subsequent step.
If you've got enough time, money and energy, and you've got enough purpose, then you can do things that you really want to do. So the plant-based was because you became disconnected with the source of our food, and so you decided to start trying to find a new way for yourself?
Yeah, it was a combination of things. Like, I'm an engineer, and being a meat lover myself all my life and coming from Brazil and all that, I don't connect with the way this is produced. The smell and the whole thing was just like, this is not appealing. What happens with meat though is that we forget about all that. So people want the chicken as an ingredient. And what we're saying is that they don't want the bird. They want that meat ingredient. How do we get to the meat ingredient and what it represents, what it delivers, what it can do without the bird? So that's why we do it that way, and it's not easy, but it works.
You're listening to another episode of Success with Purpose, where we hold conversations with the most holistically successful people we have the opportunity to connect with. We explore their journeys, their life-changing events, their perspectives, their mindset, and most importantly, their purpose. I'm Harry Goldberg, host, interviewer, and interrogator of this podcast. Father of the most incredible daughter in the world, husband of an incredible woman, and director and empowerment coach at Purpose Advisory. Hope you enjoy this episode, and don't forget to subscribe and like below. Now, let's begin. Andre, so I understand you've had a passion for business since you were 12, and with a whole lot of exceptional hard work, and I'm guessing wise choices, it's no surprise that now you're co-founder and CEO of Next Gen Foods, which includes TiNDLE. And for the listeners, that's a company that has very successfully raised 130 mil in capital, including, I believe, the largest Series A ever raised by a plant-based meat company. Before we dive into that journey, because I'm really curious about some of your key decisions, how do you define success?
Hey, Harry. First of all, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here with you, sharing a bit more about our journey. But, that's something I think a lot about, like, what is success? What does it mean, right? And it's obviously, it has to be more than one static goal, because if you reach that static goal, then what is it about then, right? After it. So to me, I came to a conclusion that success to me is being able to own your own time and then use it to do what you want, what brings you joy, what brings you purpose, gives you a sense of purpose, and that generates impact. That's to me what defines success. Owning your time, being able to do what you want, and being able to, with that, doing what you want, carry joy, purpose, and impact with it.
Awesome. So it sounds like you had an extended period of time of an experience of not being able to own your own time and doing what you want. How have you managed to move closer towards that success of being able to do what you want and owning your own time?
Yeah, to be frank, I have been quite fortunate and quite lucky. I would say most of my life. Obviously, there were times, and namely like when I was in university, I felt what I was doing was not exactly what was bringing me joy or purpose or anything or impact. Then yes, there were moments in which that was not the case, obviously. But since I started my work life, I was blessed to have opportunities and to always seek for those opportunities and challenges and everything, and be able to do it. I was I was part of environments and companies and structures that always allow me to explore that angle. So despite being part of corporations at times, there was never a moment in which I felt that for a prolonged period of times that I was doing something that was not what would fit that definition of success at that moment in time. Obviously, the bar has evolved and it has moved as I progressed, and what was success back then wouldn't be considered by me success today. But I have been always very blessed and happy with that.
So the bar moves. So obviously the standard is raising. What are some of the key differences between how you defined success back then, like say when you were in university days or just starting out, as well as when you defined success before you started your company and now that you're in your company? Like, how has your definition of success evolved over time?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I feel that when are planning about what university I was going to join and what I'm going to study. Always you have the aim of studying the best places, and it's hard to get in. Then you have that very, in those moments you have that very specific goal, which is success to me would be to enter in to be admitted into a certain university, right? And then when you are studying and you are seeing the end of that, success to you is to get a good job after you finish it. One of the most prestigious careers that you would want, with a very clear I guess our education system overall globally is designed as if life was linear and predictable, and success is defined as taking a great leap right into the next step in a very clear path. And to me, you ask what the difference of what has evolved is less about what exactly was my goals back then and so on, but the nature of the goals, nature of success and the goals to me prior to really, let's say, becoming an adult and only my professional life and career. The biggest change to me was moving from a very clear established, like, this is what you have to do to study where you are, to where you want to whatever, to be admitted into a certain job or company or school or whatever, with a very clear set of parameters. Moving to later, in the second stage, once you get into your professional life, primarily financial goals. In that beginning, you're not clear yet on all those stuff, but you have a clear success is probably being able to achieve some financial goals, reaching some level of financial security and safety, just to or growing and showing that you're adding value, that you feel you're going to be a part of that journey. So I would say number 2 is about, for me at least, the phase 2 of understanding success. After those defined goals from academics, it moves to define goals from financial perspective, or it's a position, it's a certain amount of money, it's a certain amount of pay. And then what I felt another huge leap was after you cross a certain net worth or income level. To me, it starts to get very clear that money is not what's going to define success. Yes, if you have usually if you're short on money, you may have a less happy life, chasing bills and all that, for sure, and that's something that's not great, of course. But there is a moment in which you achieve that level that bringing more money just basically means more numbers in your bank account. But to me, the biggest win and step there that happens is basically when you achieve a certain level of financial security that actually enables you to stop thinking as a self, what is good for me, what do I have to do for my own success, to what can I do to society, what can I do to help others, what can I do to grow. That for me was the subsequent step. So very clear academics, set goals. Second, financial movements. Third, that independence of financial. And then what I would say right now, at least from my perspective, is being able to do something, own your time, do something that makes you feel happy, gives you joy, that gives you a sense of purpose and impact from what you're doing. That to me was at least my journey so far in definition of success.
And I hear that in terms of when we bring it back to your definition of being able to own your time and do what you want. Right in the early stages, you're basically seeking status, like the higher test scores or the best in the class or the nice title in your work or whatever it is. You're pursuing status before you're pursuing money. And all of that, you're basically trading your time for status or academic results. And then you start to make money, and then you're trading your time for money. So you're basically selling your time instead of owning it. And now you're getting to this point where it sounds like you achieved financial security. It almost sounds like financial independence. and you are able to purchase time with assets you have and be more intelligent with the time that you're spending, because you're not spending your time to get money, you're spending your time to do things which are more important to you, like impact. Is that what I'm hearing, or is there anything else that you want to add to that?
No, that's exactly how my own journey of understanding and success has evolved so far. Obviously, I'm sure this is going to keep evolving as my life goes, and there are many things at play. Having a healthy body and mind, and making sure you can then use your if you have the financial resources and you're able to control your time, you better be healthy. If not, then there's no point in having anything, time or financial, right? But yes, you're right. You got it exactly right.
If you've got enough time, money, and energy, and you've got enough purpose, then you can do things that you really want to do, right?
Yeah, and it's one thing that to me was very clear, and I feel that shift becoming more and more relevant. It's because in the beginning, it's a lot of self-serving interest. It's about myself getting paid something, myself, achieving a certain level, myself thriving over, and getting a position that's coveted, myself becoming eventually a CEO. And then you go once and twice and so on. So it's not about yourself anymore, at least for me. It's about how do you make the team succeed? How do you make an impact on society? How do you create and influence more people? How do you make an impact that's way beyond your own circle to drive something more meaningful? And ultimately, I would see that evolving into the point of how do you leave a legacy? How do you make the world a better place when you leave than when you join? And like, what can you do from there? It's a big ambition. That's the kind of challenge that I think it's really interesting. Like, yeah, for real, that it's like, what will I like to tell people I have left better than when I found in the world, and what's the legacy? I think that would make that's depending on the answer, you can have a very fulfilling life, depending on that answer when you reach that stage.
And so you've said quite a few times now that your definition of success has changed, and you've even mentioned that in the future your definition of success is probably going to be different and probably evolved again from where you are now. And so how do you decide what type of impact you're going to have if you can also assume that your definition of success is going to change as well?
It's an evolving journey. One of the things I've learned in my life as well is that you in order for you to achieve success and for you to be happy and all the things I said, it's basically recognizing that the world is not static and everything's going to change, including yourself. And every day that goes by, you're learning something new and things are moving. So I do have that recognition that I am going to change. Things around me are going to change, and my conditions are going to change, and the place where I am and the people who I deal with, all of that's going to keep changing and evolving. And I have reached that clarity. So I don't try to stabilize or get that fixed. To me, it's basically like already, okay, I know that this is going to happen. How do I start monitoring for signs of evolution that can help me leading the way to what's next? And it's always a natural progression, like so much so that I'm saying probably my success definition when I reach that stage is going to be about A, B, and C. It's because I can see the signs and the trends and my behaviors towards some things that I say, aha. And you start studying other people as well, biographies and, other people who have reached immense amount of success by society standards in different areas. And what do they have to tell once they reach, 80 years old and they want to tell about their lives? And just learning that to me is very helpful.
So, and there are quite a few questions that I want to ask you off the back of that. But firstly, have you always been so forward thinking? Is that just part of your nature, or is it something you've had to learn to do?
I don't know if I'm forward thinking.
You founded an incredible company in a new space, and we're talking about plant-based. And when you set up, it was still more of a fad rather than becoming more of something which was mainstream. And almost everything you're talking about is still talking about forward thinking, and that you can start seeing the signs and you can start making decisions towards where you're going. And it certainly sounds like it's aligned with that growth mindset association of forward thinking, not the forward thinking of like, oh no, everything's going to be terrible and look at all these things that can go wrong. And it's, why do I even bother? I should just give up. But like this sense of forward thinking of that's where I want to get to. Like I can keep looking forward as opposed to looking in the rearview mirror. Is that just a part of you, or is it something you've learned?
Yeah. I as yes. So what you just described is yeah, it's part of who I am since I'm able to remember. And obviously, there were moments and instances in which I know I got an extra push for that, but it was definitely something. I think I don't know where this comes from exactly, but it might be my mother. She was never stopping me from doing anything. My parents were always their way of seeing things was like, well, if someone can do it, you also can do it.
Mm.
Why don't you go so it yourself? Why don't you like when I was? It's so funny. Like actually thinking about it, it's like I was 4 years old and I was unhappy because they changed something on the school, like from 3 years old to 4 years old. Now you got to sit down and have the classic, classes instead of just
Mhm.
playing around and messing around. And I was very annoyed with that. I was not liking school anymore. I told my mom about that, and she was like, "Well, why don't you go to to the lady who coordinates the entire education system and tells her about your dissatisfaction and propose her a change, and I did, right, and it worked actually. Obviously, back then she did. She did prepare this is what's going to happen, but she was always incentivizing me to go try and do it, and never about like I have never been on a mindset of why things will not work. My mindset is like, how do we get this done? Always.
Mhm.
And yeah, at times, and I know on the way it's, going to have mistakes and failures and so on. It doesn't matter. So just look forward and see, how do we make this work? What can I learn from here? So yeah, from that sense, I think that's been part of my journey all the time.
Okay, and so that's what I hear with most people. So anyone, a lot of people who I've coached, and whether that be with finances or whether it be with life and their career and their purpose and their success, the thing which usually stops them is this fear of failure. And you just said it very, very blasé, very offhand, going, sometimes you'll succeed, sometimes you'll fail, and if you fail, it doesn't matter. Let's try again. So, can you dive a little bit more into that mindset and that perspective?
Yeah, sure. I was, yeah, you're right. The fear of failure and depends a lot on which culture you are. I'm lucky enough in this case to be born and raised in Brazil, which is a culture in which the fear of failure is not that strong.
Mhm.
Um, but I did learn about the fear of failure in different countries and cultures I have lived and worked with, and that the fear of failure can be both very powerful because it's going to help you planning for the future, anticipating scenarios and making sure you're covering different perspectives and not being reactive to the environment but controlling to the extent that you can, planning and controlling the outcomes. And I think that's like the long-term thinking. For example, in Singapore, in the Singaporean culture, the German culture is amazing, and I lived in both countries and like I fully absorbed that. Fine, perfect. But I also realized that the ability that you have in Brazil and being immersed in the Brazilian culture where everything's chaos and there is a crisis every day, that ability to deal with things when they go wrong is very valuable
Mm.
because we are in a increasingly volatile world, and the only thing that's certain is the fact that uncertainty is only going to grow, right? That's just the case. And yeah, I have also learned one thing to deal with my own insecurity, which I find it's very valuable, is think about the worst case scenarios. So instead of being afraid of failing, I just think, if I fail in this journey, what's going to happen to me? What's the scenario? So let's just assume worst case scenario. Let's assume my company goes bankrupt or I lose a job, or whatever, right? What happens from there? Oh yeah, I would this. Oh, that actually doesn't sound that bad, right? So I shouldn't be afraid of failing. And I started doing that progressively, um, through some crisis moment I had in my professional life. And I think I clicked on that rationally about 5 years ago when I was able to understand and say it was a very steep crisis moment that I was living, not directly with me, but I was part of a company that was going through a very deep crisis. And then I started thinking like, okay, fine, if this goes wrong, if A happens, B happens, what do I do? And I started realizing that the plan B, C, D, whatever, they were all fine and, blessed enough to be healthy and to have some financial means to transition into something new. Back then, I wouldn't say independency, freedom, but definitely not, not in a situation in which I was living payroll by payroll, but planning for that was always comfortable, and that's when I rationalize it. But then yes, today it's really much like that. Yeah, I mean, I'll try to avoid failure, try to succeed. I'll look for how to make this happen, but on a constructive and productive view, never on a view of trying to avoid failure at all costs, because they will
I've,
happen.
I've heard of these, like the idea of a pre-mortem, for example. We get clients to do this before they're like in preparation for the life vision exercises, as an example. But I've heard some people do it pretty successfully in business as well. You imagine that you're about to embark on something. You're about to embark on a 10-year mission. There's something that you're really working to and you really wanted to achieve. And a lot of people will very foolishly decide, like if they get to that point of looking that far ahead, they'll foolishly get to the point of going, okay, well, I'll just give it a shot now, and I'll just put in all my effort, and I'll just make sure that it works no matter what. And the more intelligent people I've seen are the ones who go, well, hang on, let's look at this, and let's look as if it's going to fail. Let's now imagine that we've done everything that we're going to do, and we've got this plan, and we look forward to after the plan's been executed and we get to where we're hoping we get to the time frame where we hope that we're going to be where we want to be, and everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. Now, people don't want to go into that space because no, we've just done all this planning, we've just done all this work, especially if it's a team environment as well. It's like, I definitely don't want to like drag everyone down. It drags down the energy. It's just, oh man, really, you got to do it. And people don't really want to go into that space. But when they dive into it and then they explore it, they can start to see all the things that could potentially make it go wrong. And then they can refine it, and then it makes it more likely that they're going to achieve it. And so there are probably quite a few people who are listening to this who have done well in their careers, for example, and they've gone to the point where they could potentially go and start up their own business, or they could go into a startup, or they can kind of step out of the traditional career-focused path. And they're probably thinking, crap, firstly, okay, great, I'm hearing Andre talk about don't worry about so much about the fear. There are always other alternatives. The worst case isn't that bad necessarily. But it sounds like there's a lot more to it, and they don't want to take that step forward without knowing that they're actually going to be better off. And the other part, which I heard you share, which I really want you to dive deeper into, is this idea which you got from your mother, and it sounds like other role models as well, of don't be so worried about what other people end up saying and other people end up thinking, or what the normal way of doing things is. If you want something to change, then you got to make sure you change. So what would you say to someone like that who's listening? They've done really well in their career and they're like, I've got to take another step forward. I can't stay here. It's killing me. What would you say?
That happens so much. It's very funny, actually. So many very successful people. I mean, different levels of their careers, but like I'm talking about CEOs of listed companies who went to become a super high level at their 40s, like super successful financially and in terms of their reputation professionally. Some of them are my friends that I have made friends over my career in those companies, or others in just circles. And that question comes so much because most of those folks, super highly successful, they have had a life in which they were growing within that organization, and then they lock themselves into it, and they learn and leave that reality for X years, right? And that's all they know, and that's all they feel they know what to do and how to do, and they don't really have a clear sense of what's out there. They haven't been exposed. They haven't tried to be out there. They haven't tried to get out of their known environment because, it's always been so good and they have been growing. They did great, right? So why would they? And they haven't. But then they might reach a stage in which the company maybe restructures, or they're tired or whatever. And then they get to the stage and ask exactly the question you said. So, and they come and ask me, oh, why did you decide to do that? And how was it? And, I'm trying to look for something else, but this is, and at times what I do say to them most of the times is like, just take the leap. And what I incentivize them is to do what I just described to you. Say like, look, what's the worst case scenario? If you jump out and you don't find a job immediately, what's the worst case scenario? Like, are you serious? What are you afraid of? I mean, I know you are financially sound. I know you have access and you live in great countries and you're not depending on a visa to move out, right? I know you're healthy. I know you have a reserves. What are you afraid of? In the worst case scenario, take a year sabbatical, go back to doing whatever you were doing for the life, and you're gonna learn so much and move on, right? That's the worst case scenario. Um, how how does that sound to you? And then they start thinking, and usually what I hear back is that people saying, maybe you're right, maybe I'm over rationalizing it and afraid, and I'm just afraid of taking the leap because of exactly what you just said. People are usually only ready to take the leap once they have found the next step. But to me, what happens when you take that approach is that you are restricting your next move based on the context and framework in which you are living, which is probably the worst thing you can do, if you get what I mean. Even when I decided to interrupt my career, I was running a company, it was a very successful career, extremely young, rose to the highest levels. And then I had no reason to stop, right? And then I decided to quit. My parents, my brother, like my father and my brother were like, and many friends were like, are you crazy? Why are you going to quit without finding something else? You're employed, you're going to find something even greater and you have a name, a reputation. I was like, that's not what I want. I'm not seeking for a job. I want to stop. I want to have full clarity. I want to be in nature because that's where I get my inspiration from. I want to be at the mountains, lakes, sea, whatever, and think about it with a clear mind, no framework, no restriction of what I want to do next. And this is how this company was born, basically, right? And I was thinking about completely free of any framework or fear of or time issues.
Man, that's powerful. So there's a similarity here, but also a distinction between what you shared and what a couple other guests have shared. But I'll specifically draw attention to a conversation with a guy named Vinh, one of the world's most successful communicators and teachers of communication. And he used to be a magician, and he found he was getting good gigs and he was doing really well. But he got to a point of going, well, I don't want to just be doing this all the time. And he wasn't able to get any of the other gigs or the other work as a keynote speaker when people were just like, oh, you're a magician, so you're an entertainer. You're not going to be one of the inspirers or one of the people giving a keynote. So sorry, we've already filled that spot. And so he needed to literally let go of what he had previously. He needed to delete his online presence as a magician to be able to move forward with this idea of being a keynote speaker. But he at least knew exactly where he was going, right? So that already is so challenging for so many people because he gave the analogy of letting go of one branch to grab onto another one, but you got to let go of the other branch, otherwise you can't keep swinging through the trees. But you're saying let go entirely and just stop.
Let go of the
tree. Allow yourself to find it. Let go of the tree entirely. Just climb
let go
down
of the tree and exactly and look around, see your surroundings, and maybe there's another forest out there that you should explore, and you are just jumping between branches where actually maybe you should be looking at a forest, right? It's just like and what I mean by that is not a company or not a company or whatever. I mean, like, there might be a different path. There might be a different country where we want to be living, right? And I was actually talking to someone who was seeking mentorship the other day, let's just like friends of friends, and reached out to me and said, look, you had a successful career so far, and what would you tell to me? I want to move out of Brazil, in that case, to Europe. I mean, the guy has got passports to go, he's got citizenship, he doesn't need visa and all that. He's got a good, solid financial situation. And I was like, well, have you ever, again, he was trying to work for our company. I was like, look, I'm not hiring for any position that's suitable for you right now, but your friends of friends, let's have a chat. And then I actually asked him, and he was like complicating so much, because I got to find this and which companies and this, but then the skills and, how they always, it's so hard to hire someone who is out. Like, have you ever considered, like, what do you want to do? I want to just move. I want to move to that country. Therefore, I'm looking for a job there. I said, have you ever considered just moving and being there? And then getting, within that parameter, getting to know people, reassessing what you want to do. And once you're there, the conversation is going to be different. Do you agree? And it's like, yeah, actually, that makes sense. It's like, why are you then restricting ourselves if your key objective is to move out of Brazil, to have an international global career, and you have it all that it takes: language, visa, citizenship, whatever, knowledge, work with international firms. just go and then figure out. And I was like, oh yeah, that may work. And I was like, if that doesn't work, you know what to do. Pack back and go back to Brazil and go back to what you're doing. And that's it. 6 months, you have no kids, no babies, no nothing. Just go. Oh yeah, that might be the best time of my life to do it. So do it, right?
And so, what about someone who's listening to that and going, well, I do have a wife and kids, and like I got the babies, I've got the people that I'm responsible for, and I'm not in a fully financially sound position just yet. What would you say to them?
That's the portion where I mean, I haven't reached that stage of having kids, and I know I'm pretty, in terms of flexibility, I'm pretty privileged. So everything I'm saying comes from a very privileged position of flexibility, and over time, what I've built financially, and also in terms of being able to live in different countries and all. But it's hard for me to. I don't want to sound like I know exactly what to do. But one thing that I would fundamentally invite that person to do is do the same exercise. And I don't know. I know involving schools and all that, it might be much harder. But I have seen many friends who actually took that leap and went on a sabbatical for a year with a family, and they were traveling the world together and doing this. So I have seen that happening. Usually, you need less than what you think you need. Usually, you can leave and do stuff, and maybe it's not a sabbatical like going to be a year out. Maybe it's just allow yourself to jump out and allow yourself to have that year to figure out what to do next. Even if that year becomes 6 months after a while, you found out something interesting. That to me is something that could work. That I would consider if I were in that position. But it's tough. I mean, I don't want to be. I mean, each one knows its own shoes and story and trajectory. I don't want to sound like I know exactly what to do in those cases, because I just don't. I what I know is what I've done, and I never regretted it. And those things were pivotal moments of my life when I took those such decisions. Those I can share about.
Okay, so what have those pivotal moments been?
They were always related. A few that I have in mind, like I have, kind of a few moments in my life that I feel when I look back that they have changed who I am, just a leap forward. And there were a few, like, the first time I moved a city. So I was taken out of my context when I was 12, 13 years old. My family moved to another city, another state. And it was difficult. I mean, you're 12, 13 years old, getting to a new school where you have all the gangs and stuff. So it's always about being accepted into that new environment. That was damn hard, and getting to know all that. So that was a pivotal moment because he opened my mind to a broader world than just the city where I was born and lived until then. There was a moment in which another pivotal moment when I traveled for the first time abroad and spent a month traveling abroad, in this case in Germany, back in 2005. And then I realized how much I loved the whole experience and how much I wanted to prepare myself for that. That was another one. And that led me to another pivotal moment when I decided during university to just stop. I was like, I'm going to stop for 6 months. I have nothing to lose. And I'm going to get a full job internship in Germany because I want to know and feel. And that was zero risk, right? I mean, you can just stop, go back and continue studying. I want to do that. And I got it. Did that in Germany again for another 7 months. And that was another pivotal moment in which I decided that I wanted to have an international global career. And then everything that came from career-wise was always pointing to a global career. Another pivotal moment when I decided to join out of engineering, join an investment fund. Completely unknown. I didn't even know what private equity meant by then. Just found there was a bunch of very smart people who I admired. And I want to learn something. I didn't even know where I was getting myself into. Completely outsider. And it was amazing. Really changed my life. Just very not traditional. Then I moved to Singapore. That was another pivotal moment. And I think the last one I have my clear memory about was jumping out of my career then to start the company. Those are all pivotal moments that to me, they change or accelerate the course of my life very clearly.
Yeah, and they all sound fundamental. And what I really noticed there is that there are a lot of pivotal moments that you were able to take note of. Most people don't think of so many pivotal moments. They think, well, I guess I started university and then I guess I started my job and I guess I made a good career decision. Like those are the pivotal moments. And here you are saying, like you listed 5 or 6 pivotal moments that have gotten you to where you are, and it's gotten you to quite a successful space. I mean, what was maybe let's dive into the career one because I think that's probably going to be of most interest to most of the listeners. You were doing really well in the career that you were in. You got to a pretty senior role, I imagine. Where were you working? What was the company and what was your role?
I was actually I was actually at a joint venture between two listed companies, and that joint venture was the biggest food distribution company in Singapore. I assume it still is. And I have, I did grow into the ranks until the CEO retired. I took over the joint venture, reporting to the board, and I was 29 years old when that happened in Singapore, being Brazilian. And I was coming from the minority shareholder. So I have immense gratitude for the majority shareholder because they backed me as well to take over that leadership position. And I learned so much. I mean, that I was the youngest, I was the only foreigner ever taking that position and all that. So I took with great pride. It was a massive challenge. No one really wanted that challenge, frankly, as well, because it was really tough, but it was a very successful journey. So yes, that's where I was back then. There was no reason why I should interrupt that career at all.
And so what was the moment that made you decide I gotta jump out, I gotta leave? Even though you're what was the moment that led up to that and what was the reason you even continued to pursue it, even though especially your father and your brother and a few other people were saying, you're crazy, Andre, don't do it. Like what led you to the decision of leaving and then why did you also leave?
One thing is that I hadn't ever since I, was during my studies when I started kind of, I didn't start from zero, but I took a company from almost zero to being sizable enough so my father could actually even take his income out of there. And this company still exists and he runs it. So ever since that moment, I wanted to have my own company one day. But then my career, the way I designed was like, how do I grow as much as possible? And then eventually go back to that space, entrepreneurial space, right? And that was always in my mind. So that's number one. And then number two, I was within this journey of the joint venture and the crisis we went through in the other company I was at before as well. One of the shareholders was always very entrepreneurial, despite being inside a company that was not mine, right? But by definition, they felt very entrepreneurial. I had a lot of autonomy and I had a lot to build, and that was keeping me very motivated and driving forward. There was a moment to your question, like what changed then, right? I mean, why is that what happened that made you realize that eventually that wouldn't make you happy anymore? And for me, it was things were getting under a more structure, more stable. The company was getting more successful, and it was part of a bigger group. The joint venture was bought back by one of the partners and would become a wholly owned subsidiary. And as a wholly owned subsidiary, you will become part of a corporation. And as part of a corporation, then it's not that entrepreneurial journey anymore. It becomes less interesting to me. And then just looking around and seeing like, I don't see myself as much as I admire whoever is, in certain points or not. And I do have some people in that specific company who I really admire and I still keep in touch with. Uh, I never seen myself following the same route. So I was like, that's not the path I should stay because that path for me doesn't really drive me. That's how I decided it was not time for me to stay. And then I had entrepreneurial drive. So that has helped deciding what to do next. And I had the plannings of, if this goes well, what happens? If this goes wrong, what happens? And, A, B, C, D options. And I was comfortable with them all and just decided to take the leap.
Did you have this idea of next gen food or TiNDLE when you left that company, the distribution
Yeah.
company?
Yes and no. I had an idea of starting on a company, entrepreneurial in the plant-based space. That was a space I was already fascinated with, and back then I had been working with different things related to it. But that was one of the potential routes. So remember when I said, like, what happens if this goes wrong? I had plan B, I can start a company. Plan C, I could just go for a year out. Plan D, I could just, maybe I'll study something elsewhere. I don't know. Or join another company and so on. So there were a few options that I had in mind. in my mind. It's not that I had anything guaranteed, frankly. It's just that that was one of the paths. And then when I decided to quit and travel, was to seek clarity of what out of the paths I could see potential, for me, which one I should look at deeply. And eventually, maybe there could be a new one as well. So stars aligned, serendipity also happened. And then Timo, my business partner, he was selling his first business and moving to Singapore. All of that happening in the same month. And that was serendipity. And in there, we went and started Action Foods. So things just kind of ended up connecting.
Yeah. Okay. And so
there's a lot of luck, obviously, as well, right? I mean, I'm saying all of this, but in the end of the day, I just created options. I was okay with them. I took the leap, but many things can happen on the right time, in the right way, with the right people. And I have been collecting options and contacts and network, and just making those things, they pay back one day, right?
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it wasn't just luck. It sounds like you, as you just said, you were collecting it. You created the luck for yourself. You created the opportunity.
Yeah, timing is out of control, though.
Yes. Yeah,
and bad luck also happens. Like I was when all of this was happening, that was January 2020. So I decided, I gave my notice of like that I was going to quit in November 19. And then imagine, and I was actually handing over in March 2020. Which, as you can imagine, may not sound like the best timing ever for you to decide to jump off of the career. COVID, like lockdowns. But it was fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so you mentioned before that you have quite a few, you've had quite a few people who have pushed you forward, or potentially in some ways held you back. But you mentioned your mother as one of your most influential role models. Who have some of your other role models been, and how have they helped?
In each one of those pivotal moments, or in moments in which I remember I have learned key aspects of behavior, there is someone there. So remember when I told you that I've been telling you how, I was always driving forward and look at solution, or looking back and trying to see problems and all this stuff. This I can attribute that huge push. I already had the ability to question and look ahead and all that. But professionally, there was a massive click by working with a guy called Pedro Faria. He was the founder and CEO of the fund I worked with. And I had like the immense luck, like incredible, that I had the opportunity of working with him straight fresh from university. And he was one of the most successful investors in Brazil. And he was the founder and CEO of that fund, and one of the most prestigious fund in Brazil. And I was working directly with the guy. He turns out to be incredible and super smart, resilient. And this is when working with him was when I learned one of the key aspects of everything I'm telling you today, is like their resilience. There would be days in which we would say, oh my God, what we've been planning for and working hard for since, like months ago, just didn't work. And then I was like prepared to go to work next day, and just like, oh guys, let's do something else, because that's not going to work. Let's just pack our bags and do something else. And then he would come even more excited, because he would have then thought that maybe the fact that didn't work was actually better, because now he has a better way of and all the time with every single thing you can imagine. So that was a person who, I could learn that with. And then another one, my brother, who has chosen a path. He went to Germany, was working internationally. I have seen and learned a lot. I could watch his journey and understand what I wanted from that and what I didn't want from that. And also he opened the door for me, for example, to get my internship in Germany that I spoke to you about. Another cousin of mine who was doing a very successful route. And because of him, I actually went to this investment fund. Again, I applied for it and I did it all. But the only reason why I applied for it in the first place, because my plan was to go to consultancies, and I even had an offer from them, was because my cousin, who was someone who I really admire, was working there. And I was like, well, if he's there, this sounds to be like, it's probably a great place. And that's how I applied for it. And it turned out to be a pivotal moment in my life. So those are people who were pivotal. My father, with many aspects, obviously, as well. And then a few others more or less relevant along the journey.
Yeah, okay. And there's something from that which I really want to dive into as well. You were talking about how if something doesn't go to plan, you got to find another way to make it happen. You got to find another way to move forward, and it's a new opportunity. You got to be resilient, or at least you got to maintain a sense of resilience. Uh, and yet, you've also shared a couple times that your approach is to always just stay flexible and try new things and whatever, and go down a different path. And so, how do you balance those two elements together? This idea of committing to something, because obviously, the longer you spend working on something, and the more attention and energy you put towards it, the more likely you are to find a suitable outcome. Versus this idea of um, needing to take it, just try something else. If that's not working, then just go off and do something else. Like how do you balance those two?
There is a false and a very logical but false, dilemma there, actually, frankly, because it's not. I mean, I'll just give you a start from the practical example and then dive into why I think so. Right, we are one of the rare startups, frankly, that like from July 2020, that's 3 months after we started, right? 3, 4 months after we started, when we did our first drawing of what we wanted to achieve. Timo and I started with that white. There's a whiteboard which we both keep it. That we said that's what's going to happen in 2020 by month, 2021 by quarter, 2022 by like just first half, second half. And I know when I tell you all about that flexibility, and it sounds like we've been pivoting like crazy around, but actually no. Like what we were saying back in July, we have executed that, until and we have achieved what was written there up to today, right? And all the key milestones and things almost to the date, with a few variations here and there. Some a bit more successful, some a bit later, changed one country to another, whatever. But in the end of the day, the fundamentals are all there. But that doesn't mean that we had a very specific path to achieve all of that, and that we had a very specific, method, and we were flexible to deal with different things that are thrown our way. That's where flexibility versus like I always look ahead, but I think that the challenge here is like it's being very focused and very forward thinking on the broader perspective, wider, bigger picture, and being very flexible on how to get there. So don't take me as someone who is not thinking ahead. I'm pretty crazy about that, frankly, very much, but it's very broad. I'm not seeking one specific secure outcome. I'm prepared for variations along the way. I have a directional view of where I want to go, and I will work towards it, knowing that things will go wrong along the way, that I have to adapt and just deal with it. And I don't try to nail down to that level. That's what it means. I don't know if that was clear, but I think that's how I deal with that, what I just described.
I hear what you're sharing, similar to like an analogy of going on a long road trip. You know which city you want to get to, and you know some of the things which you want to see along the way, but you don't know all the problems you're going to face. You don't know if you're going to run out of petrol. You don't know if you're going to find something which you really want to see while you're going along the way. You don't know if you're going to have some sort of illness while you're going there, or if some hotel or motel which you're supposed to check into is overbooked or whatever. There are millions of things which could go wrong. But I'm hearing that if you're focused on, firstly, the outcome which you want to get to, or at least the direction which you want to go, and it sounds like the experience that you want to have while you're on that journey as well, then it doesn't matter what goes wrong, because you just maintain your direction. So it doesn't even matter if you quit your job and you decide to start up a company and COVID hits, because you still got the outcome which you're focused on, right?
It's exactly that. And if you make the same analogy on the road trip, I mean, you can take a route in which you try to plan for everything not to change, right? Which stops, and I'm gonna, what's my consumption? Where I'm gonna stop? Where I'm gonna fill up the car? Which fuel am I gonna put? And how much I'm gonna pay for it? And where I'm gonna have my dinner and my meals and all that? And that's how I'm gonna reach a different city, right? As you said, things can go wrong. You can have a massive congestion on the way. You can get a crash. You can get, something. Funnily enough, when I was in Australia, I decided the crazy, stupid idea of driving from Sydney to Gold Coast, and I just thought it would be a nice ride. It's freaking far, but worse than freaking far. It's actually boring as hell. Like, because it's not like a coastal drive, right? It's a boring highway. It's very slow, boring highway. But I knew the destination. That's where I wanted to get. And on the way, there was this massive fire blocking the road. And guess what? There was this massive detour of 500 kilometers detour. I never seen something like that in my life. So we drove down to Sydney, bought a ticket, airplane tickets, gave the car back to the rental company, got a ticket, and went to Gold Coast, arrived around the same time we were planning initially. So we got to the same place, fine, we adapted, and no problem. That's exactly what I mean. We still reached the place where we wanted. We still done what we wanted on a very different way. We just pivoted. We're not like, oh my God, it's the end of the world. We have to. No, like it's just that. We still reached the objective. We still reached what we wanted. Just making the analogy on the road trip. That's how it plays.
And so what's the objective? What's the outcome? What's the really clear goal for TiNDLE and for Next Gen Foods?
That's where it gets really interesting, because this journey, it's much less about my own objectives and Timo's own objectives, and much more about what's the extent of the impact and change that we can cause in terms of challenging and changing a paradigm that has been around for thousands of years. What is this paradigm? The paradigm is that we all have learned that eating meat is absolutely great, and to what we enjoy, that ingredient, that fried chicken, the steak, burger, that must come from animals for that experience, the taste experience. That's a paradigm that's ingrained in society, and meat being the best ingredient you can get for thousands of years. We want to challenge that paradigm and create an impact by proving to the world, to as many people as we possibly can, and providing them a solution to try to prove that actually we can have that same great moment experience, nutrition as everything, without the animals, right? And that's the major objective of our company. And it's not about what myself or Timo want for ourselves and what's the exit we're going to have or whatever. That's not what it's all about. This is about how do we create an impact in the world that say, like, this company has helped, the world evolving from A to B, at least a tiny bit, and has touched millions of lives. And, it has set the path and the way for other entrepreneurs to do the same and create it. That's our goal, which is pretty bold. It's much less about, we want to be the market leader for that. No, this is, if we do that right, what I just described, those things are just consequences. But the bigger ambition we have, the bigger goal is to really do what I just described in the beginning. And that's pretty challenging. That's our take.
Okay, so I'm going to dive right back into that in a moment. But I wrote down a quote which I saw you share in an article a while back. And it links directly into what we're talking about now. And you said, for a business to succeed, it needs to understand its consumers deeply and be able to address their needs in a scalable way with clear fundamentals to growth and profitability. Now, you're trying to talk about understanding a consumer deeply, but at the same time, you're talking about changing what the consumer does. So how do those two things work together for you?
Very easy, actually. Understanding the consumer deeply doesn't mean you stick to what the consumer does today. And I'm going to make a parallel because it's easier to understand looking back in history, but it's the same thing looking forward. If you look back in history, throughout history, what consumers always wanted in transportation was basically to move from A to B in the fastest and most convenient and affordable and comfortable way, right? Safest and all that. Through life, this has evolved from walking to horses to chariots to whatever, right? And there you go, cars and trains and planes and whatnot. Now it's very obvious, like what consumers always wanted was not be on the back of a horse, was not be on a fancy chariot, was not be on crossing the transatlantic journeys on a fancy cruise ship. Flying is better, flying is faster. It may not be as posh and all that, but actually that's consumers want to go from A to B. So they may not want to go from A to B using the ship, but the ship is what was available back then to go from London to New York. So understanding consumer deeply, and I would emphasize the deeply here, is going beyond the behaviors that they're having today, which may be a product of the current context in which they are inserted and the paradigm that they are inserted, and go deeply into the fundamentals behind what consumers really want, emotionally, psychologically, technically, whatever it is that is driving, what are the drivers? And that's when we say going deeply, that's what we mean. Go beyond understanding what they're doing to understanding what they really want, why they're doing, what are the drivers, and try to assess those drivers and try to provide solutions that to those drivers on a different way. That's exactly what we want.
Right. So instead of people saying, I want to eat a delicious chicken, you're saying what they actually want is they want to have this particular experience and this psychological experience as well of the taste that they get while they're eating it. And so you're catering to that.
Very easy on that one as well. No one eats a chicken because it comes from a bird, frankly. Maybe some people, but that's probably less than like you eat chicken because there is the texture and the fiber and the taste and versatility and the recipe or nutritionals, but not because it comes from a bird. Fundamentally, when we have meat, and like being a meat lover myself all my life and coming from Brazil and all that, even myself when I was going to slaughterhouses, I was like, I don't feel like eating meat today. Like I don't connect with the way this is produced. There's something wrong. And it's not just, obviously the animal ethics is a massive topic, but it was not even that. It was even before that. It was just the whole thing, the smell and the whole thing was just like, this is not appealing. What happens with meat though, is that we forget about all that and we don't want to know and learn about that. And then we see the massive piece of steak as if that was produced, by the butcher and not by the animal being slaughtered. So people want the chicken as an ingredient, despite the fact that it comes from a bird, not because it comes from a bird. And what we're saying is that they don't want the bird. They want that meat ingredient. How do we get to the meat ingredient and what it represents, what it delivers, what it can do without the bird? Then that's what I mean by going deeply in what they want and not in what they've been doing.
Okay, and so the plant-based was because you realized that you became disconnected with the source of our food, and so you decided to start trying to find a new way for yourself, or what led you to that?
Yeah, it was a combination of things. Like I'm an engineer, and as an engineer, I always led to think of better ways to producing whatever, right? A mechanical engineer is about, how much energy resources do you consume to produce something, be energy or materials or whatever. That's number one. And then I went to investment fund and I got fundamentals of business. And then I went to the meat industry for 7 years. And when I combined those three things and I said, like, this doesn't seem to make absolutely any sense. Yes, it made sense until today, and the companies have evolved, society did evolve, and that's how we get protein to billions of people around the world. But that's not sustainable. And when I say not sustainable, it's not only from an environmental perspective, which is obvious, but from a financial perspective. And guess what? If a chicken or a cow is taking, take a cow, it's taking thousands and thousands of liters of water and emitting tons and tons of carbon dioxide. If water is a finite resource, which it is for fresh, and it's going to be well valued one day, which I would bet a lot that it would, then how can we accept that we're using thousands of liters of water to produce this steak? I think, and how can this be cheap? It just can't. There's a lot that's wrong out there. How can you grow an animal for 45 days, chicken, which is the most efficient, lose 30% when you slaughter and you don't want to eat some of the stuff that comes with it, right? And then you're going to produce it and freeze it and you have then salmonella and this and that, whatever. And then you transfer around the world. But ultimately people want to have that super cheap ingredient. And it's like, that doesn't make sense. It's so much effort, so much energy, so much, inefficiencies, that for us to continue growing that for 10 billion people, which we're going to grow one day as a society, increasing our consumption per capita, none of this is going to make sense anymore. One of the two things going to happen. One, the supply will be kept at the level of, consumption and consumption of water and all that. Look at Australia. Australia is not growing its cattle, because of water. It has increased the quality, it has increased the standards, but it has not increased the quantity to supply more, right, for a while. That's either that, and then prices will readjust and it's going to become more expensive and the market will dictate that and people will not have access to that ingredient. And we probably we need to find a more efficient alternative here that will be able to cater to what people really want, the taste, the experience, the ingredient itself, without that very inefficient way of producing it. That's why I started looking at alternatives, and that's how I got to plant based. And I got satisfied with one specific product, and I got myself like really excited about this space.
Yeah, I hear the forward-thinking nature in you as well. Exactly the way that you're sharing it. I'm getting amazing insight into what's going on in your mind, and it's not because of what most people would expect, right? Like most people would think, oh, it's a vegan food company. That this Andre guy must just be some kind of fanatical. There's like some kind of fanatic focusing on the ethics, and you can't hurt animals, even if it means that you're going to have lesser food on your plate or whatever. I don't care. I'm just going to make sure that the world changes so that we stop having meat. It's just your mindset is just saying it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense what we're doing, and there's got to be a better way. And that aligns with both your enjoyment of solving problems as well as your enjoyment of having new experiences, as well as with your sense of ethics and your environmental focus and your impact. When you're talking about making sure the world is just a little bit better once you're done, and you're referring to legacy, than if you hadn't done anything and moving the needle just a little bit. You're not talking about moving the needle of ethics, which is what most people would think you're talking about. You're talking about moving the needle of just society doing things which are more sensible and less wasteful and more intelligent.
Yeah, that's something that's very interesting that you touched on that, because our company, and we're very genuine to who we are, and at times we've been criticized for that, but like it's just who we are. Most of the company is actually not formed by vegans, but most of the company is reducing a lot of their animal consumptions, because when you get like really aware of everything, it starts to be, and then you get more aware of the options as well. And then in the end of the day, we see a pattern of like, we just ask people around, and we see a pattern of reduction and people learning new things and getting new. That's, and one thing that our company is very pragmatic with, and that's again genuine to who we are, and again genuine to what we want to do, and you got it spot on, is that we admire those who are doing what you said, like getting more people to be, more ethically aware about the animals, and just an environment and all that, and then giving up their moments and experiences and things they love for a greater cause. We admire a lot all of those people. We just don't think that society will move from that 3 to 5%, whatever number it is, doing that for a greater cause. That's not going to break all the way to 50%. Not in the time that we want, right? It's not top of mind, frankly. If you go to a restaurant, and I'm saying like general society, 95% of the people, when they go to a restaurant, they couldn't care less about like, the environment or whatever. They just care about having a great moment and the great food and the taste and the recipe. What's the best option on this menu? And at times, how much that costs and whatever, right? Never about like, oh my God, what's the carbon emission? That we haven't, unfortunately, reached a stage in which societies that worry about it. And I don't think we can wait for it, because that's going to probably take 100 years, right? So to us, the way for really being able to cause that impact I was talking to you about is not by telling people what not to do, is by providing better options, and just inviting people to try. And it's not about changing who you are. It's about just, you like chicken, you like fried chicken, give it a try. Try TiNDLE, let me know first if you can even say it's not chicken, and two, even if you say it's not, how do you like it? And guess what? We have seen countless people actually say, oh, this is actually better than chicken because it's juicier or whatever. And fine. That's what we want. We believe in driving behavior, not by excluding people from something, not by being judgmental, not by being preachy. We believe in driving behavior by incentivizing people to move on to what's next, what's better. And that's challenging, but that's exciting too.
It is challenging, and I love that you're sharing that it's so exciting, because most people would hear such a challenge and go, oh no, that's going to be way too hard, I just can't do it, that's like way too much of a challenge. I can just do my little part with the little thing which I'm doing, and I can stick to that, but oh man, that's just way too much. And I'm really, and I'm sure you've had a lot of haters, or a lot of people who are trying to shut you down or make things a lot harder for you throughout the journey as well. Actually, before my next question, I'm curious about that. Have you had quite a few people, or maybe even industries, try and stop you and stop your growth and stifle it?
Like, I don't give a, about it. Like, yeah, I just don't care. There are, sometimes some very vocal vegans who think that you shouldn't make a plant-based food that tastes like meat because it's not meat. Why does it need to take, like, just eat broccoli and just eat mushrooms and all that? Okay, fine, go do your things and, like, leave me alone. You are great. You are right. You're not wrong in your own context. And I admire you for taking that step and being an example and fighting for it. I'm not going to fight you back because I really like what you're doing. But guess what? That's not 95% of the people. Unless you want to keep your impact to that 5, we got to think of ways to talk to the 95. And that's what we're trying to do. By the way, we're on the same boat, right? So there are those, and then there are obviously those who say, "Oh, if it's not coming from a bird, it's not chicken, right? What is plant-based chicken? Is a chicken that's vegan on the line?" Like, oh yeah, dude, whatever. Like, eat it and tell me if this is not chicken, right? I don't. What's chicken to you? I don't give a really about it, seriously, and I just find it funny, frankly, and I just keep moving. Um, there is in one thing that you mentioned before that was very interesting, that you said this is a very big challenge, and most people would just say, "Oh no, oh my God, this is too big. I'm just gonna keep doing my own little things." But when I told you about success and what it means and all that I told you that it's less about what I need and my comfort and what I am doing for myself. That's exactly that difference, right? I'm not, yes, you're right. If it was only for me and not taking a massive challenge, I would be probably doing something more relaxing. I wouldn't be a CEO of a startup, um, dealing with Asia in the morning and, Asia in the evening, and then Europe in the morning, and, US in the afternoon, and trying to grow through all of those problems and challenges and everything else. I would be, frankly, if it was just about me, I would be doing something easier and lighter, right? Fine, but it's not. And that's the massive difference here. It does not fulfill me anymore as a success measure. When I told you about the joy and all that, that wouldn't fulfill me anymore. And even from a very egocentric perspective, I need that, frankly, even for myself, right? So I feel good when what I'm doing has an impact that's broader than myself, and that brings me satisfaction, and then that's the difference. Yes, it's a massive challenge. Yes, I'm putting a lot of effort and sweat and blood and everything else you can imagine into it, but it pays back. It pays back in the impact that's broader and bigger than myself. Hopefully, yeah.
Well, in objective sense, it probably already has. Either way, you've already managed to move the needle a fair bit. So you've already done a hell of a lot, and in line with your definition of success, which might be completely different with how other people might measure their success. But in terms of yours, that means that you're on the path to living more of a successful life. You're already doing it. But as part of this, I'm really curious from a business sense as well. Selfishly, I'm asking this question for me as much as for any of the listeners. You've got this, like, you've identified your customers or your consumers' deep needs and what they really want and what they're really after, and then you're able to find a solution for it, which has a whole bunch of additional benefits as well. But how do you formulate such a bold strategy? How do you actually go to the drawing board and create it? What was your process that you and your business partner went through in order to make that happen?
I mean, frankly, I would say um, what made our company very special since the beginning, what makes it so interesting and valuable. But it was about how much intention and how much experience and how much knowledge we have put on the drawing board, not only to develop the technology, not only to develop the product, not only to develop the brand, not only to develop the go-to-market, not only to figure out production, but most importantly, how to wrap all those things up with the experience that I have and had all through my life, the experience that Timo had in his life, and some of our early colleagues as well. How we have put so much intention and experience and knowledge to create a business model that was designed to achieve that mission that we were setting the company for. And what do I mean by that? Just in a few examples. We wanted a company that was global. We wanted a company that was able to grow quickly, that we wouldn't be set or, wouldn't suffer setbacks due to infrastructure or to legislation or whatever. So all of those parameters, we wanted it to be capital efficient, and we wanted to be, focused on a few areas in the value chain, but very light on others. So we created that. With the process of creation of that was basically a combination of my own business experience with TiNDLE's own business experience and incredibly complementary paths, and then putting that together on a very intentional, meaningful way as a business from the get-go. Before even we knew what business we wanted to do, even before we knew that chicken was the category we were going to do. I think that's what we mean by just putting the business even ahead of what's the product. Then is it chicken, is it pork, is it all of it, is it fish, is it a combination of all? Why? And then that's how much intention we did. How do we design the business model that can fulfill that mission? And what's the best in the product? What's the best technology? What's the best go-to-market? What's the best production model? What's the best asset strategy? What's the best capital funding? All of that team. And that's how we've done it. But again, there are easier businesses, right? I mean, selling chicken is much easier than selling plant-based chicken. And that portion, the challenge between trying to address a fundamental need from consumers to addressing an immediate need is that addressing a fundamental, you need to go through the first barrier of paradigm. And this, after you solve the technology, the distribution, blah, blah, scale, right? You still need to face that paradigm. Selling a car is very easy once everyone already has been on a car. Selling a car when everyone is using Chariot back in 1895 was probably bloody incredibly hard. The roads were not suitable, was not trustworthy. You couldn't get the fuel. There was no gas station. The horse was always there, trustworthy, could travel, thousands of miles. And that's the challenge we live, which is not easy, but that makes it more interesting.
So I'm guessing someone like Elon Musk really inspires you in that sense.
He does a lot. He's not a lot. I don't draw a lot of inspiration with some of his own personal styles, and we're just different in many aspects. And he's much more of a genius. Like I'm definitely not. I'm normal, and not. He's a genius, but he's the guy. He inspires me a lot. And there's one bigger thing overall is like when I think whatever I'm doing is hard, I just think that this is a guy who created Tesla from the get-go. This is a guy who was part of the PayPal, and this is a guy who put a rocket. And I'm a mechanical engineer, right? So this is when my mechanical engineer mindset is like, Jesus, you got a rocket up and down. Like, wow, this shouldn't be possible, right? And this is like when I think whatever I'm doing is hard, I look at him and say, like, yeah, that's a guy who inspires me to be better, to be bolder, to think bigger, and to just think that my challenges that I may be thinking are huge are actually not that big, and I should just solve it, right?
Oh, that's amazing. I want to pay tribute to what you just shared, because most people would look at someone like that and just it'll make themselves get depressed. They're like, see, that's successful. That's amazing. What Elon Musk is doing, he's setting a rocket up and is bringing it back down, and it's not supposed to be possible. No one else has ever done it. And that's just incredible. Oh, I'm never going to amount to anything. And you're, on the other hand, you're going, that is incredible. I love it. It's amazing. It inspires me to try and do more.
Yeah. And everything I tell you about what he's doing is bigger than himself, probably. And it's not about the money and all that. What is success to Elon Musk? Probably really changing the world. Not in a small way, probably, right? And he's moving, and he has the gravitas and the power, and he's doing it. So to me, Elon Musk, on top of, I think everyone will see Elon Musk as a guy who is highly influential for the auto industry, for the rocket, for space industry, and that's true. But to me, what people like Elon Musk are really special for is because people like Elon Musk, they would inspire millions probably of entrepreneurs and people around the globe who will do normal stuff, right? Like we were just doing a plant-based chicken company. Like this is not a rocket science, like literally, right? In his case, it is. And they inspire so many of us to think bigger, to think broader, to be bolder, and not to set boundaries and things on their own paradigms. I think this is the importance for humanity, for of people like him. And everyone gets just stuck in his Twitter behavior or whatever. I think, well, there are many things there that, one may be judgmental about what should or should not be done, but just go beyond that to what he represents to humanity is just incredible. He is inspirational for sure, and he has already done more than most people did for society.
Yeah, he's already done more than most people will ever be able to do, and that's also pretty impressive. That element, like that aspect. So many people get caught up in the drama, and they probably struggle to get even further into their success because they get caught up in the drama. And there he is. He's spending more time posting on Twitter than engaging with Twitter. He's busy actually doing things, as opposed to all the people who are wasting their time trying to cut him down or trying to tell him that what he's doing is wrong. And just like what you said before, it's like, yeah, I don't really care about those people. It doesn't matter that much.
It's funny because it's natural that we get stuck on the surface, right? So there's another guy, biographies here behind me, Steve Jobs, right? Everyone is like, oh my God, this is like Steve Jobs and Apple, amazing. And yeah, amazing for everything. And then some people would say, oh, he was tough to work with. And yeah, okay, yes, this is also no. But to me, what he represents and why I admire him so much is like, frankly, this is the guy. So we all agree as society that technology and, smartphones and whatever have made our lives so much better, right? And but this is the guy who I would credit not to make technology accessible. That I would credit probably mostly the other guy here behind, Bill Gates, right? Just making the personal computer and all that, the Windows platform that would be easy accessible. But the guy who made technology really sexy and easy to use for anyone and so on, that to me is credited to Steve Jobs. And creating something inspirational and sexy and really getting everyone to really care about it, and then use this extremely powerful piece of toy that really changed the world, not because it is a mega computer with a mega processor and so on, but because it's sexy, it's cool, and it has functionalities that, someone, you don't need to be a programmer to like it. And I think this is what I would credit this guy for. That's very important and fascinating. So I'm fascinated by his trajectory. Obviously, Bill Gates as well. Like it's all over. Those guys are just outstanding. I love going through their life stories and biographies and all that, trying to go that one step deeper, understanding what they really mean, what fundamentally goes through their mind, what is it that they really represent beyond the surface. And that's fascinating.
And if someone goes and looks at the TiNDLE website, they're not going to see the formula for how it's created or the science behind how you give the fibrous or the texture or the whatever. You're just going to see burgers which look like chicken and it's saying it's plant-based. Like you're just going to see people having an awesome time eating food. It's like, and on the flip side, right? McDonald's doesn't show obese people eating food. It doesn't show the fat quantity or whatever, or the contents in their food. They're just showing people having an amazing time and loving it, right? It's along the same side, but you're just doing something which to you is more purposeful.
Yeah, it's again going deep down to understanding what are the decision factors behind someone buying something and someone changing a behavior, right? Because at times buying it's changing a behavior marginally or not. In the case of a new category, it's not a marginal shift. In case of a new category, it's definitely. In case of an existing, it's a category or commodity is very marginal. So yeah, you can just drop the price a little bit. Someone's going to buy this frozen chicken instead of the other one. Done, easy. But for creation of that, you need to understand what is it that people really like. Oh, the texture, the taste, and this. But fine, that is an enabler. What is it that people really love about food in the first place in chicken? Oh, if I ask you what's the best meal you had in your life, I can guarantee you here being recorded, I can guarantee you, if you remember, it's not by yourself watching Netflix and having the nuggets. It's definitely at a restaurant, probably in a meal prepared by a chef, very likely to be traveling, very likely, and with people who you love. Then I ask you the best food experience. This is what's going to come to your mind, even before you get to the taste and the texture and all that. That's what I talk about when you go deeply understanding consumers. It's like we want to give people what they love, just that. And that's why you just mentioned, like, you go and have people having a great time. Yes, that's what this is about. And you don't need to compromise your meal with cardboard tasting ingredients to save the planet. You can enjoy your life, you can do everything you love, and you can do that without the animals involved. That's all. As simple as that.
Yeah, amazing. As a slight aside, I was just having a chat with a friend the other day who found out I was vegan, and that we'd raised our daughter that way as well. And she's like, "Oh man, I don't know. Maybe I'm just not a good cook either way. I can't make food taste good. I cook fish at home, and it kind of just tastes very bland and crap. But I go to a restaurant, and it tastes amazing." All right, right. So maybe it's not the fish. She's like, no, it's probably just the cooking and the flavors and everything which was added to it, which is fine. I'm not trying to change her mind. She's changing it for herself ultimately. I didn't even raise the conversation, but it's fascinating the changes that people can come to when they start to second guess or challenge you referred to it as the paradigms which they've had and which they've inherited from thousands of years of human history, right?
Yeah,
And
and
I just,
guess
yeah.
guess what? What's very interesting. You mentioned something about a friend, right? If you really ask people about if you monitor really like chicken experiences, what are the last 10 times you had chicken? And in general population, not someone living on a privileged place where you can go and have chef crafted foods every day. I can guarantee you that 9 out of 10 times it would be just okay. It would be, not fantastically done. It's going to be on a fast food or whatever, on a grab a bite or wrap, whatever. And you're not going to over rationalize it. You're just going to eat it. And then it's like, was it fantastic? Oh, no, yeah, maybe a bit too dry, or, the temperature is not right. It was over or undercooked and whatever. That's chicken. But no one, if you don't ask, they're just going to go through the day, and that's fine. And it's all good. For new categories, and plant-based in this case, because it's so intriguing and because there's such a massive challenge to the existing paradigm, they will over rationalize. They will eat it. They'll be looking at the fibers. They'll be looking at the juiciness. They'll be looking at everything. They'll be trying to take the taste, and they're going to be like, oh, but this is a full meal. I want to see how it tastes by itself. Okay, yeah, be my guest, taste it by itself. Like, how many times have you seen that same person having a chicken meal and asking, I want to see how this chicken tastes by itself, right? Oh, it's a bit too dry, it's a bit too juicy, it's undercooked. This is the thing that happens with the category right now, and we cannot underestimate. That's why we put so much effort, and we started on with restaurants. We wanted to have people operating at that highest level in an environment in which they're not over rationalizing, they're just having a good time. And yes, they can look at the food, the product delivers. It's also very hard to convince chefs if the product doesn't. So at least the product is an enabler. But we wanted people to challenge that paradigm with that experience. That's why we did it that way. And it's not easy, but it works.
And that brings us straight back to the strategy, right? I just wanted to comment on this idea, or the way that you formulated your strategy and how different it is to the way that most people do it. Most people go really narrow with what they want to do, and then as a result of that, everything else which falls under it is really narrow as well. They limit their options. Whereas you go really broad with all the possible outcomes that you could be getting to, as long as it's aligned with some core part of your mission or of your purpose. And then that just gives you so many more options of how you do it. Like you said, you didn't care if it was going to be chicken or if it was going to be beef or fish or pork or whatever. And I think I read in an article a while ago that you're quite open to starting those up in the future as well. But for now, you just decided we're just going to focus on one thing, and we're going to make that one thing incredible because it's aligned with what we're looking at. And then you go through literally every single part of the creation through to the sale and the distribution.
One thing we're very careful with on the business is not to get ourselves lost in. I mean, we went crazily broad in geography because we wanted the company to be global. So we started quickly expanding globally and internationally in testing because we really don't think that this phenomenon that we're going through of transformation between animal farming to something new is going to be played in local markets. There will be room for global players who are really causing a global transformation. And we believed we could come up with a solution for that. Fine. That's an immense, crazy complexity, to be fair and to be honest. But then we were incredibly narrowly focused on what portions of the value chain we would do, what portions we would not. Are we going to do production ourselves? Yes or no? Are we going to do distribution ourselves? Yes or no? And are we going to do many SKUs and many categories? Yes or no? And the answer to all of those things was no, 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 right? So we were very mindful of where we were broad and open and really wide, and where we were extremely narrowly focused so we could be able to execute on what we wanted. That's something that we put a lot of intention behind.
Yeah, and I find that quite inspirational. And then the next question I have is, how did you do the market research to understand what your consumer deeply desires? And the reason I ask this question is twofold. Firstly, I'm really curious about the business success and the psychology behind it. But I'm also curious for the listeners who are in a career role. And obviously the way you gain more career success is through knowing what the key stakeholders want, and ultimately knowing what the key decision makers about the future of your career want as well. And so how did you do that market research? How did you dive in to really understand what your consumer deeply desires and deeply wants in such a short period of time as well?
Great question, and hard as hell, because
Don't tell me that, damn it.
the immediate thing when you talk about market research, and we all learn by the books, right? Oh, you get market data, you buy this database from whatever and so on. But yeah, that works if it is something that's ubiquitous, and if it's already established and mature, and you can learn and get the signs from data. When data is widely available, distributed, and representative, it statistically makes sense. That works fine. If you're innovating, however, that doesn't work at all, right? So if you're trying, and the cliche parallel that people could do is like, the obvious one is the faster horse. Like no one would say you want to, everyone would say you want a faster horse. Everyone would say they want a phone with whatever functions, but never with only a screen, right? With a keyboard that I can type my emails. BlackBerry, right? So those things, if you try to innovate, stuck in the current framework that we all have been educated in, which, yes, get the data, analyze the data, come up with answers. My personal view, and what we actually scrapped the whole thing and said, like, this does not work for innovation, right? And for real innovation. And the reason why it doesn't work is because let me just actually take an example and you will see why it doesn't work. Take our category. How would a corporate approach what we're doing? They would say, let's say, I'm a meat company and I want to start in plant-based. What am I going to do? I'm going to get my marketing tell people, and I'm going to buy some Nielsen data. I'm going to buy some whatever, look at the category, and then I'm going to do a consumer research. I want to understand what consumers, why they want to eat plant-based. If they want to eat or not, they're going to assess the size of the market. And if they want to eat, why do they want to eat, right? And then we're actually effectively asking people, why do you want to eat plant-based? And the people will say yes or no. Like, okay, 60%, X% will say yes or whatever, fine. Take that 60 and say, then why? And they're going to think and say, well, it's better for the environment, it's better for the animals, and it's healthier. That's what they say, by the way. And then they say amazing. And, just rank it, you do all the numbers and say amazing. So I'm going to come up with, and do you define yourself vegetarian, flexitarian? Flexitarian. Okay, fine. So it has to taste like meat. And then you have to say it's sustainability, animal welfare, and health. Great. And then voila, you put in a package, you throw in the groceries, a product that's exactly like everything else. Mm-hmm. And it's zero appealing, because guess what? When people are buying their food, they're not thinking about the animals. When I say broadly, obviously people who already took the decision and they're vegans, and congrats to them, and they should be inspiration to all of us. They already made a decision. But take that aside, 95% of people are not. So they're not rationalizing any of this. They're going to go and get what they want. And what they want is a tasty, delicious food that may or may not be cheaper. It depends. And the drivers are so much more complex, right? So for us, what we've done is that, yeah, we did that just to understand roughly what it was and the secondary drivers and the primary secondary drivers. But I guess fundamentally what we really spent time doing was understanding the psychology behind the behaviors of each one of our groups of consumers, who they are, what do they really do? If you ask them, what do I mean by that? I mean, you ask them, would you buy plant-based? Yes. Why? Oh, because it's more sustainable. And then you close your eyes, just follow that same person. And he or she is going to go to the groceries or to the restaurant and have a piece of steak. Guaranteed. And then you ask, why did you not order? Oh, yeah. Oh my God. I didn't. I just wanted the steak. I didn't see. I didn't know. There was nothing appealing. It's just like, didn't even cross their minds. So we went deep down to understand what is it that people really want, but from a psychological, emotional aspect, and then trying to address it and understand what's primary driver, what's secondary, and trying to go not from a perspective of trying to address the rational things, but instead trying to address the emotional ones instead. That's not easy. And I mean, a lot of people will tell you just parallels, and people don't really get it. A lot of people will tell how Tesla is always emphasizing the product tech specs that they have, right? The product, but it's not that true. If you recall, when Tesla made their way in the brand and the connection with consumers, when they made it exciting, what they've done was basically to communicate the experience you'd have with a car. It's a freaking innovative car that accelerates like nothing else you have seen before, with a great sound system and a crazy iPad in the middle of the car, and like a few 3 points. Whereas all the other brands would come and say, here's my tech spec. This is like a 100-page guidebook with this is how many horsepowers I have at RPMs. That's emphasizing your product and all the tech specs about it. How do you build it? What's the material going into it? What is the size of they just went for emotional aspects of a car buying for those who are car lovers. Acceleration, sound experience, the looks and the emotional connection. I'm going to get something, a product that has all of that and delivers, and I'm going to emphasize my communication. Same for Apple. Apple was never telling how their processor on a smartphone was better or not. Then in the beginning, right? I'm saying like when Android and Apple started the journey of smartphones back, Apple was a bit ahead, but let's say 2010, when Samsung was always about, I have more memory, I have more processor that's slightly better, I can put an SD card in and out. Apple's like, well, this looks beautiful and it's brilliant and it's amazing and innovative and always kind of fluffy, but not fluffy, emotional. Those are the things where we use that in our research to try to break through that first layer of rationalization that makes everyone look the same at the end of the day.
I think that's maybe the best business insight that's been shared on this podcast so far. I've recorded over 20, 25 episodes, and that's amazing. So thank you just for sharing that alone. And I'm curious if we dive even deeper into it. And this is more relevant to the listeners and also to a whole bunch of my clients, probably. If we take that exact same approach of understanding what the core desire is, when we look at the average person who is really successful in their career, like you were, and considering moving, just like you did, even though everybody else was telling you you were crazy to be doing that. The first part is we got to understand, I guess, what's driving people. Like if I'm applying the same framework, what's driving people to not want to leave? What's driving people to stay? Well, they want the money. It's like, well, do they actually want the money? Let's dive a little bit deeper into that. It's like, well, no, they don't exactly want the money. They want to be able to have the things that they think that money is going to buy them. Okay, do they actually want the things that they think money is going to buy them? Do they actually want the nicer car? Do they actually want the nice things or nice bag or the wallet or the phone or whatever? Is that what they really want? Well, no, they probably just want the experience that they're getting when they have that. Okay, so what's the experience which they want? Well, it's probably some sense of self, some sense of identity. They want to be able to have a sense of importance around other people or that status, or they want to be able to feel more successful, feel like they've done things better than other people when they were bullied at school, or whatever it is that's going on for them. You'd be able to dive deeper and deeper into it. And what's amazing there is that, what I'm struggling with there is that for each person, that's going to be so unique and so different and so specific. And I haven't really heard about you niching. Like you're talking about chicken that not chicken that tastes like chicken and even tastes better than chicken. which comes from a bird. And so you're redefining what chicken is. And yeah, sure, that's niche, but almost everyone has chicken. So you've identified this this experience that almost everyone wants to be able to have. How do you how do you do that when it's something which is even more broad, something which is even larger scale?
That's a tough one. But on the chicken era, and again, it doesn't mean we will succeed. We're going to try our best, and we have great signs that things are working. But the hypothesis is exactly what I just described, right? So extrapolating on that, yeah, I think you just so many insights in what you just said, right? Exactly that, breaking down what is it that we really want, what is it, and I would even say the other way around, because frankly, from my experience with people who came to me to ask for insights and they wanted to do the jump or not, and I mean that may not be statistically representative, but at least one thing that I was interesting when you were describing all those things, you were always focused, what is it that they want? And you mentioned, well, maybe they want that status or the money or the car or the, just going one step after another, layers after layers. One thing that always came to my mind is like, my question was like, why not doing the jump? And the why not is like, what are you afraid of losing? What's holding you back? And it's a bit different. It's not that they are just afraid. It's not about the money. It's insecurity. I don't think I can answer your question, but just thinking out loud together is like, what is it that fundamentally, what is the emotion? Is it the fear of missing what you have? Is it insecurity of being in a worse place? Is it really what that you need something there? And frankly, many times it's not. But is it that you're afraid of what's coming next? Is it that you're afraid of not? Or is it that you connect your own being with that position? Some people do, right? They always wanted to be a CEO of a company, and then they're the CEO. And if suddenly they're not, they're nothing. It's like, seriously, right? And I think that's those are things I think about, but that's really just thinking out loud. I think your question is too hard. It's a great philosophical one that we could debate for hours. It's a hard one though. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And thank you for trying it. Thank you for playing it out. I don't think that anyone solved that question just yet. Even the likes of Tony Robbins or Oprah probably haven't solved that question yet, even if they claim that they have. And so, like, what people actually desire and what they don't want as well. How to move away from
some questions may not have one answer, right?
Yeah.
And it is what it is, and that's part of the beauty of. I mean, we're all different, and as you said, there are. I think that the more you get out of the surface, and you're gonna find more common grounds. So, what I'm afraid of losing may be very different from what you are afraid of losing, but we're both afraid of losing something, and that may be holding us back into something, right? So there is the broader. The deeper you go, the broader you try to, out of the specific, what's my life? Where do I live? What do I do? How much money do I make? Stuff like that versus yours. But we are both afraid of losing what we have. And we are usually afraid of the unknown. But you're going to find some similarities. But from there will be a moment in which probably we won't find common places, I guess. And that's the beauty of it as well.
Yeah, that is beautiful. You're going to find people who will just never want chicken, which doesn't come from a bird. Okay, that may very well happen, but that's not going to be the majority, right?
It will happen, and there will be some that will say, "Oh my God, I never thought about it this way. It makes a hell of a sense, and I'm never going to have any chicken or bird again." And there will be others that will be like, "I never had a chicken in my life. I'm a vegetarian. I love this taste." And well, does this taste like chicken? Say, yes, it does. Amazing. Now I love chicken. So that happened before, actually. So
wow.
yeah, but it's super funny. But and then there are all of those aspects and all of those groups. I think one of the things we try as much as possible, and I try, is not to try to narrow down and nail one specific and say like we need everyone to do something, or it's like broader thinking. statistically, like what are the reasons and how many. Yes, there will be those who will always look at it and say, no, bird must come from, chicken must come from bird. Okay, fine. If you think of it this way, that's fine. If horsepower needs to come from a horse, you should not drive a car, right? It's like, it's fine. And if you think that's the way and you want to back off a horse, be my guest. And there's no problem. Like, there's space for everything in the world. But how can we create a movement that impacts a broader population and to an extent, and not being radical? We don't need 100% of anything. The issue with the 100% is that when you're trying to reach 100%, you're usually stuck at zero, right? Or at whatever. So it's like, how do we address a sizable amount, whatever the sizable amount is, and try to move and accept the outliers, fine. And then we get there later, right? That's the thinking.
Okay. And so now I have a couple questions, which I asked at the end of most podcast conversations now. So firstly, the people who are listening, everyone has limited time and energy, right? And let's just assume that the person listening is inspired by your journey and they want to become more purposeful. They want to be more successful in a more holistic way. How would you help someone decide where and how to dedicate this limited time and energy to become more purposeful?
Highly individual, because purpose also, like, what is purpose to you? What's purpose to me? But I think the first step for whoever that's common across the board is awareness. What is purpose to you? What is purpose to the listener? What's purpose? What makes you feel good? And what makes you feel like you have accomplished something? What gives you that sense? When you talk about purpose, it sounds so millennial, right? Well, we are probably, but just talk about it for seriously. Purpose. What does it feel like? Like, well, what makes you feel good? What makes it feel like you have done something great? Not only to yourself, but to other people as well. It can be your boss. It can be your team members. It can be your team below you. It can be your company. It can be your society, your neighborhood, or building, whatever. But something that makes you feel good because you have done and achieved something. The first thing I would say, mapping those elements and mapping those moments and trying to go deep in understanding what is it that is there in each one of them, and trying to find that common ground. So I always feel happy when I help someone out. Why is that so? Like, and why do you feel good about that? And what's behind, and what are the situations? And then start defining what purpose is to you. Once that's defined, it becomes a lot clearer what you could eventually do to make it more purposeful, because now you know what purpose is to you. If you don't, that's probably just guessing. And if you have clarity and awareness, I just tend to believe that everything becomes clearer once you know and you have awareness, whatever topic it is. So that developing awareness of purpose is to you, what causes it, what drives it, and then as a subsequent step, what are the things that you can do that will drive that? So instead of eventually, I did a great job because I wanted to achieve a certain objective and I felt very good as a secondary element. Now you understand what that element is. Instead of trying to do a great job and waiting for that to happen as a consequence, look at it as an outcome and see, what can I do to achieve that? And that will help you probably focusing on what drives purpose. At least that's my reading. It works for me. It helps me keeping my head on track when, obviously there are moments of insecurities, moments of challenges and all that. Those are of anxiety. Those things do help me a lot. And I think that's very helpful for everyone to define and to remain on track.
And so if I were to try and distill that, it sounds like what you're attempting to say is, but I might be hearing you wrong, is you want to be, if someone's not sure of what their purpose is, then try and work out how they want to impact other people, whoever those people are. And then just try and explore the ways that they will be happy with the impact of their life on those people. Is that what you're sharing, or is there more depth?
Not necessarily, because the purpose may not be about other people. The purpose may be about saving animals. The purpose may be about replanting trees. The purpose may be about breaking records. I don't know, by setting an example to the whole society. I mean, I don't know. So yes, it's almost that, with the exception that it's not necessarily helping people. What I'm saying is, like, instead of thinking of it as a purpose, as this abstract concept that millennials like to talk about, it's basically think about what makes you feel good, what makes you feel special, and it's in something that is not short term. Like, for example, makes me feel special is that I bought this very expensive car. Yeah, fine. I'm pretty sure that after you bought a super expensive car, after 6 months, it's just your car, right? So take out those things and things you remember and say, I feel special because one day I've done certain things and the outcome of it makes me proud until today. And it's been years. Those are the things I'm talking about. Look for things that makes you feel special. It might be helping other people. It might be achieving something. It might be setting an example. It might be discovering breakthroughs in science. I don't know, right? Each person would have that, but try to find what triggers that special feeling, because that's probably what purpose means for you. And then instead of having that feeling as a secondary or as a consequence of whatever you have done that has caused it, start focusing on how to get that instead and put our energy and focus on driving purposes instead of having purpose as a simple consequence of whatever you've done at luck. Right. That's what I would suggest.
Yeah, that's gold. Make it more tangible rather than this metaphorical thing. And I want to bring back to one of the first things which you said, which is that success is that you own your time. And so I know that the management of time is really important. Yet you still do things which are with no real monetary gain, like being part of this podcast and just to be able to share your message, and just because you're doing something which feels good for you ultimately. But a lot of people, when they start to recognize, I want to own my time and my time is really important to me. I wonder what you'd say to someone who wants to learn to work smarter instead of just working harder.
Yeah, that's very important. I do have this sort of conversation with my team every day, with different team members. There are many ways that I have seen, concrete ways and concrete behaviors that actually work in your favor or against you in time management. And a few of them that are very obvious is not being able to delegate, for example. And it's very, usually everyone would say that, yeah, you can just delegate. But I'm going one step, I'm going for real. Like, what do I mean by being able to delegate? Trusting your team and whoever you're delegating that to, and most importantly, being comfortable with the fact that once you do it, the outcome is not going to be exactly like you would probably have done it, and there's no problem with that. So I'm saying delegating, not just like, let me get rid of this stuff that I'm doing. It's like, no. I'm actually saying delegate for real, including the challenges of delegation, and things are going to be different from what you would have done. And don't try to fix that. That's part of the process. Because that's what I mean by really delegating, like for real and properly. Because if you're not doing that, you're going back and checking everything and fixing everything. You're not managing your time anymore. So that's one big key behavior that I see a lot among team members or people who I deal with, that I try to help them being comfortable with. Another one is trying to seek perfection. You can spend as much time and energy as you want in every single activity that you can imagine. It doesn't matter how big it really is. I can get this table that I'm working here, and I want to cleaning. If I want to clean it and make it clean, and my concept of cleaning is 100% no dust, no nothing, I can spend my life literally cleaning my table, and I'm not going to reach 100% because by the moment I'm over, something has changed. There's a new dust, and I'm just being an example, but this applies to every single thing we do in corporate life or in work life or anything every day. So knowing where to stop and what's good enough, because it's the cliche 80-20 here, obviously, but probably you can achieve 80% of whatever you're doing with 20% of the effort, really. And then the rest is just the curve. Like, you get good enough, and then the rest is such a grind and so much effort and so much energy. Again, time, just a lot of time. So not delegating and for real, being perfectionist, it's a massive issue. And another one that I actually see a lot as well is allowing yourself, putting free time as a top priority in your mind. A lot of people feel good when they're super busy and they cannot stop, and they feel that if they're not making good use of their job and salary and all that. Like, yeah, but all the great ideas that I told you that I had in the pivotal moments of my life, I was not underwater grinding through, back to back on my day, including the design of the company. We were not, for us to think of everything I just described to, we were not underwater trying to, cope with things falling everywhere. No. We were intentional about it. So free up our mind, do value the fundamental value of a brain being able to think without a messy environment and a crazy routine. I think those three things. There are a few others that I observe, but I think those three are absolutely key, and I see that happening with everyone around a lot. And I do keep myself focused on that as much as possible.
I love that. And I'm going to follow up with another question of, you're saying perfectionism is basically the enemy, right? Perfectionism is what's going to hold you back from being able to do the things that you want to do. But you also said you just got to work out where good enough is. And yet your entire companies, which you're the CEO of, the entire purpose of it is to become even better than something that's been around for 1,000 years or thousands of years. You want your fake chicken to taste even better than chicken. And that good enough is not going to cut it. So how do you balance perfectionism with good enough when good enough isn't good enough, and perfection is just going to keep you stuck and get you nowhere?
A perfect example, because I'm going to actually tell it that actually it does, and good enough applies 100% here. What do I mean by that? If we were to replicate exactly a chicken, we would have to including feathers and bones and beaks and eyes and everything else and blood, frankly, right? That is what replicating a chicken for perfection would really mean. When we're going to get this right? Right? And then you go moving back from there. No, we don't want that. That's pretty obvious, right? And, it's laughable as it just, showed. But actually moving back, it's the same. I'll give you one example. Our product, when it's raw, it looks, the color is not like raw chicken. It's like a bit of a cooked chicken, like slightly cooked chicken, despite being raw. We could have gone for a scenario in which let's develop a certain technology or whatever. So when it's raw, it's that pinkish or whatever, and then it transforms into the right color once it's ready. And that may kept us, we could probably still be on a lab right now trying to figure that out, right? And maybe coming out with a molecule that eventually couldn't be allowed for sales or too expensive or not scalable. So that's what I mean by good enough. And you actually touched the exact same. It's good enough. What is good enough? Good enough is what gives you the texture you want in our case, right? Good enough for was it give you the fibers, the texture, the taste, and the versatility. What does it mean? And then again, remember when I told you that a chicken is not that amazing chef chicken experience all the time. Well, frankly, if you go out and go to any QSR and have any chicken sandwich or burger in any QSR, I can guarantee you could make it just as good or even better with TiNDLE than with that chicken. That's good enough. Yeah. And
amazing. You set such a high standard, and at the same time you accept when something's good enough, and you have the results to prove that that's the right approach to take. Amazing.
Good enough doesn't mean perfection. I think that's the difference here, right? I mean, high bar doesn't mean perfection, because at times it's changing the problem. The chicken example is the most, I mean, it's incredible if you think about it, right? Replicating a chicken to perfection means having the beaks and the feather and everything else. You don't want that. That's not great. You want the perfection on what it means on the taste, the food, meat, right? That you want perfection. But again, you want perfection when you're having that. When is the moment? Perfection that moment, and then you don't need it to be raw and pink. So it's basically breaking it down and solving for each one of the elements and moments and so on, and not trying to be perfect across the board.
Yeah, I love it. Now, I am curious. Sorry, I'll start that one again. I am curious from you though. What advice would you want to give to your younger self? You have a few decades of experience now, and you can think back to yourself when you were as early as you can remember, your childhood, and you want to go and give younger Andre advice. What advice would you give to yourself?
Talking about, I think one thing I never do is I never I never say I wish I have done something different, because whatever I have learned and seen and so on is a result of whatever I've been through, including mess up that I may have made. So, but your question was already more sophisticated. As what would I tell myself if I went back in time one day, right? Or what would I tell a friend who is going through that? I think there are a few things. I think one of them is understanding and being open and aware, and probably people only realize that once they go through their lives and experiences, but like just being very critical about and very clear about the fact that our educational model is not representative of reality, frankly, of the real world. It's just like, oh, this is the book, that's how it works, just take this and you're going to be successful, just do that and you're going to be successful. That's not how the world works. And study and you learn how to do this test, you're going to get an A, and the A is going to get you to a successful position. Once you get out of the real life, there's no such a thing, right? So that is number one, just that clear thing. And then moving from that one then to the second one would be have as much exposure and experiences as you can to different cultures, to different topics, to different people. And if that means you're going to make your studies a bit worse here and there and so on, it doesn't matter. Because what do I mean by that? I would rather have a B and having lived in 3 countries and not being able eventually to get the perfect language here and there and nail an A, but having lived through those experiences, dealing with different cultures and understanding different perspectives, that's so valuable. So that's something I would say, as much exposure as possible to different people, different cultures, different realities, even if that means compromising a little bit of your perceived that path that it should be like. That's another one I would say. One very practical and very pragmatic: go live abroad. Just go. Whatever. If you're studying, go and go and just go. It doesn't matter how. It doesn't matter where. And there's a reason for that. When we are born and raised in a certain culture, in a certain environment, in a certain context, our lenses of the world is basically limited to that. And everything we look and judge and see and perceive and realize is basically using those lenses. When you live in a different culture, and for real, and I'm not saying live on a bubble of expats from the same culture in another country, like that's not what I'm talking about. I really go and connect and learn and become a local in another place, learn the language, do whatever. Cross that barrier, and that's going to open your brain like incredibly well for understanding not only your culture and the other culture, but understanding that how to be able to look at things from different angles, different lenses, different perspectives. And having different perspective, and the ability to move around is probably one of the most lacking attributes or skills that in our society today. That's why it's also so divided, right? It's either right or wrong. No. It's just a different perspective. It's a different angle. If you don't respect, if you don't understand, you're never going to be able to even discuss, right? So adding that perspective piece for me, I would say to anyone, just focus on that as well. Yeah, that's quite a lot, I think, already for advices, but I would certainly give those and a few others. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so you've shared so much wisdom in this conversation. I'm really looking forward to sharing it with the world. But given everything which we've shared, is there anything else which you'd want to add, or is there, of everything which we've spoken about, is there anything which you'd really want to highlight and emphasize as, like, because people listen to a podcast and they've listened for it's been almost 2 hours now, and they've listened this whole way through and they've heard what you've had to share, and most of the time they then get out of the car and they go off to the next thing, or they finish their run and they go on to the next thing of the day. If there's one thing that someone's going to take away, or that you'd want a listener to take away from all of this, what would it be?
I would say if you are in a moment of, the most fundamental steps I've done, and the ones I remembered when I was studying, they were pivotal moments. They were never easy and they were always a risk. right? So because of that and the relevance that it can have in someone's life, I'm addressing this to those who are listening. If they listen all the way through to 2 hours, probably they're interested in that. But I would say don't hold back on yourself. Don't be scared of a leap just because it's a leap. And try to understand what are your insecurities. Why are you not wanting to do? Get yourself comfortable with scenario A, B, C, D, even if that means like jumping, as I was telling about my friend, go without a job. You want to move countries, go without a job, figure out. In worst case scenario, in 6 months, you come back. Like, so what, right? Obviously, provided that person can afford it and so on. But like, just think without boundaries. That's, I think, what I'm saying here is like, don't be afraid of taking leaps that could be the most transformational things in your life, and try to find a way to get yourself comfortable with scenarios in which that leap may not work exactly as per plan. Once you're comfortable with scenarios that things are going to go wrong, it's all upside from there, frankly, right? So just do that exercise and move on.
Powerful. We'll leave the conversation there. Thank you very much, Andrea.
Thank you, Harry. Great talking to you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Success with Purpose, and I also hope that you feel capable to apply some of the perspectives and learnings from this episode in your own life. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to like and subscribe below. And until next time, live with purpose.